All set.
Thank you. So, hi again, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I wanted to begin by introducing myself, and I'm actually going to say hi to everyone. I'm not sure if you can see me too well. Hi, I'm Christina Chiappetta, and I have been with the DEC, the Bureau of Water Permits, for the last 5 years. I became the MS4 General Permit Coordinator here at the DEC just about a year ago. And I've worked with the MS4 General Permit for the last 15 years on and off. I'm also pretty familiar with our other stormwater general permits, as well as the DEC's Speedies program in general. I'm saying all that not to give you my resume, but just to let you know that if you do have a Speedies related question, I might be able to help you, but I can certainly get you in touch with the folks who can help. I am joined today by Kathy Tchaikovsky. I'm going to pass it over to Kathy.
Hello, I'm Kathy Tchaikovsky. I'm doing a encore performance with stormwater. I'm currently working for the last 12 years. I've been doing the Mohawk River Basin program, acting as the coordinator. But I was given an opportunity to help out, giving some educational material out on the new MS4 permit, and I said certainly. So right back to Christina.
Okay, jump back over to our presentation here and get us going. So first thing, I just want to kind of give you the lay of the land for today, what to expect for our presentation. Today's going to be a little less formal than future presentations or presentations in more professional, I'll say, more professional settings. Let's do this. There we go. A couple glitches there. We have a lot of information that has gone out to all you folks in the last month, so we want to create a space to have some dialogue throughout the presentation today. So periodically, we're going to stop for a couple of minutes here and there for some Q&A options rather than waiting entirely for Q&A at the end. I'm also going to have Q&A opportunities at the end of the entire presentation. For today, please enter your questions into the chat box. I will be managing the chat in order to consolidate and also respond to the questions. At the end of the presentation, again, we'll have a little Q&A, a little longer of a Q&A session. And if I don't address all of the questions today, if you were on a little earlier, I was asking our Office of Communications if we can have our chat saved. So I'm going to try and address all of your questions at a later time, probably through email. I do see a couple of questions popping in quick, and they are catching my eye. So the presentation today is being recorded, and I do intend to provide that for everybody. So you'll have minimally, you'll hear myself and Kathy talking during this presentation, and then you'll also have responses to some of those questions that come in the chat box if we don't have time today. Secondly, we're not going to be going into all of the details of every permit requirement today. As you know, this is only a 2-hour block of time. That's not nearly enough time to go through everything today. But we are going to address some of the highlights. You, as the MS4 operators or those folks who are implementing the program, are responsible for reading the permit and the associated documents. I do appreciate, and I wanted to let everyone know this, your patience over the last few weeks. I've gotten a lot of emails and calls, and I'm doing my best to get back to everyone. As of probably around 11 o'clock this morning, I'm pretty caught up getting back to folks. If you have not heard back from me, please forward your email again or leave me another message. Again, I did have quite a bit to wade through, so I want to make sure I get in touch with everyone. And with that, I want to say, continue to ask me questions. That is the only way that we can make this program better for everyone. Now that the permit is out and we can all talk about the requirements in there, implementation is underway. You and I are going to be partners in achieving compliance with the permit requirements. And with that, I'm going to begin our standard presentation here. A little bit of background on our fundamentals, just as a quick refresher, and also just, again, a refresher on some of the vocabulary that we might be using today. The 6 minimum control measures specified in our final general permit, GP-0-24-001, come from federal regulations. The MCMs represent the non-numeric effluent limitations of the general permit to reduce the discharge of pollutants to the maximum extent practicable. That is MEP. They are also there to protect water quality and to generally satisfy the Clean Water Act. The MS4 operator must implement the permit requirements for each MCM, and those permit requirements consist of best management practices. Under the US EPA's Comprehensive General Permit approach, which was written in the Phase 2 remand rule, the DEC has to include clear, specific, and measurable requirements throughout our general permit. This general permit strikes a balance between the resource expenditures and the overall benefit to protection of water quality in order to meet MEP. The permit contains more realistic and achievable timeframes for implementation of the conditions, as well as the legal requirements for compliance schedules. I think I note this later, but there's a lot of information also in our responsiveness summary about how we got to where we are and the resources involved for our permit requirements. The stormwater management program developed by the MS4 operators must reflect the applicable requirements for the MCMs contained in the general permit. A couple of dates I wanted to go over with everyone. You've gotten a few emails from me now, but one of the earlier ones had a list of dates just to keep track of, get everyone up to speed a little quicker, and so that we can start paying attention right off the bat with some compliance deadlines. So the effective date of the permit, as you all know, was January 3rd, 2024, just a few weeks ago here. The annual reporting year has changed to January 3rd to January 2nd of every year. The electronic notice of intent will be due on February 20th of 2024. July 3rd of 2020, oops, sorry, I missed one. March 4th is when the interim coverage under GP-0-24-003 expires. July 3rd of 2024 is 6 months from the effective date of coverage. I'm noting that because that is one of our earlier compliance dates, and specifically that is when the SWIMP plan update is due. Interim progress certifications are going to be due moving forward with this permit April 1st and October 1st of each year. Your first report that you're going to be sending in for this permit is going to be an interim progress certification, and that's due October 1st of 2024. Annual reports are due on April 1st of each year, and the first annual report will be due to the department on April 1st of 2025. So I'm emphasizing that there is no annual report due in 2024. However, please continue to maintain all of your records generated from March 10th of 2023 to January 3rd of 2024. That's in accordance with our permits records retention policy. Because our interim coverage expires 60 days after the effective date of permit, which is the March 4th date, the annual report that would have been due on June 1st under GP-0-24-003 is no longer required. And that is language straight out of our fact sheet. Under the Comprehensive General Permit approach, the NOI is only serving as a notice of intention for the MS4 operators to gain coverage to discharge in accordance with the general permit, and it's not going to contain any requirements specific for compliance of the general permit. I am emphasizing this because I've had a few questions about this lately. The NOI compared to the NOI for this permit is a little bit different than the past permit. The previous iterations had an NOI that was many pages long, and you had to include your measurable goals. You had to include a lot of different things that you were going to do in order to comply with the permit. But again, with this general permit approach, the DEC has determined how you will comply and at what timeframes you will comply with permit requirements. And so that information is no longer necessary in the NOI. Again, the NOI will no longer include those measurable goals. Again, does not need to be done because our measurability is inherent now to the general permit. All MS4 operators need to submit an NOI. I've gotten this question a few times. I've submitted an NOI many years ago. Do I need to do it again? My answer is yes, please submit an NOI. Everything is now going to be following the federal e-rule, so everything will come in electronically. The e-report submission number, this also went out in an email I sent previously. I've highlighted it here for you all where you can find your e-report submission number. It's at the top of your NOI. when you're filling it out online. The e-report submission number is needed when you're completing the certification page. There's a question on what is my, fill in your e-report submission number. So this is where you can find that information. I've also gotten a few questions about determining receiving water body information for your NOI. What if I don't know where I discharge? So my pretty formal response to that is that this is a surface water discharge permit. So knowing which water body you discharge to is important. A good place that you can look for some of this information is on the old ORI sheets that were required under GP-0-24-003. There was a field there for subwatershed. You may have information there about, maybe you have more specific information there about what water body you discharge to. There was also a requirement under GP-0-15-003 to map preliminary sewer sheds. That's also a great place to look to try and determine where you are discharging. That said, if you find that as you start to implement your program and update some of your documentation, that you're discharging to additional different, however you want to say it, water bodies that you did not previously include in your NOI, as that information changes, the NOI can get updated. We do have a stipulation in the permit about updating the NOI, and that is that within 30 days that you have information that needs to be updated, you update that information and resubmit the NOI to the department. In addition to that, there were some questions about just signing in to get the electronic form and things like that. There's a how-to guide, and at the bottom here, I have New York State DEC N-Form Public Users Guide. If you type that into Google, you will get our how-to guide on how to create an account and sign in to get your N-Form. I think I should have mentioned actually earlier, I do have a few folks on the line here, other DEC staff who were parts of either the N-Form or development of the NOI. So they're available for Q&A in just a couple minutes if there are questions about those items. The last part of my intro here that I'm going to get through is about the multi-sector general permit and about gaining coverage under the multi-sector general permit if you were previously using the MS4 general permit to capture all of your multi-sector general permit eligible facilities. If an MS4 operator is operating an MSGP eligible facility, that facility now needs to gain coverage under the MSGP. It's different, again, than how it was in our GP-0-15-003, but even under GP-0-15-003, those MSGP facilities had to implement everything that was written in the MSGP, like benchmark monitoring or wet weather monitoring. That was also still requirements. So although you have to change where you are gaining coverage, there's no environmental benefit change. You're still doing all of the same tasks that should have been happening previously. If an MS4 operator, if you do need coverage under the MSGP, please fill out the MSGP ENOI as soon as possible. When you are filling out the MSGP ENOI, do not use your MS4 permit ID number. That's been happening just a bit. You are going to have a new facility. It's new to the MSGP program. So you will click no for has the facility been assigned a Speedies ID under previous versions of the MSGP. And if you do need any assistance with MSGP, specific questions, not just switching out of MS4 to MSGP, I've left an email here at the bottom of the slide. You can contact our MSGP permit staff. The last thing I did here was I put together a list of potential municipal facilities which may require MSGP coverage. Again, this presentation will be available later, but if you want to take a screenshot of this, go right ahead. I did want to highlight a couple of municipal facilities because I did receive questions about them. There used to be a sector AE, under the MSGP, which allowed for coverage of highway garages. That sector was removed from the MSGP. There is no longer a SIC code for highway garages to apply for the MSGP. So highway garages will continue to be covered under the MS4 General Permit. I'm going to say that last sentence one more time. Municipal highway garages will continue to be covered under the MS4 General Permit. You do not need coverage under the MSGP for those facilities. At the bottom of the list here, there's a wastewater treatment plant. I don't anticipate any, if many, wastewater treatment facilities coming in for MSGP coverage, as most either already have MSGP coverage or their individual speedies permits include their industrial stormwater discharges. So that is on here because it's a potential, but what I would recommend is reviewing the permits that are already existing at those facilities prior to applying for MSGP. And with that, I'm going to stop just for a minute for a little Q&A, and I am going to pull up our, I'm going to pull up my questions here. And I'm going to skip a couple of questions just so that I make sure to address what we were just discussing, some of these ENOI or MSGP related questions. So I have a question here about when will the annual report and interim progress reports be available. They were previously on the website as pending. They are still listed on the website as pending. I do not have a timeline for the annual report or interim progress certifications right now, but I'm going to be working on those forms in the next few weeks and I will make them available. I'll touch on this a little bit now, but I will also address it later. The compliance items summary tool would be a good place to start with what to expect on both the interim progress certification and the annual report. The annual report form will likely occur what is in the tabs as recurring items, those annual repetitive items, and the deliverables will likely show up on the interim progress certification. I do not intend to duplicate questions between the two forms. Scroll down here. There was a question here about the population and median income of the municipality, and do all municipalities, regardless of their median income, have to adhere to all MS4 requirements? And my answer is yes. This is a surface water discharge permit requirement. It comes down from federal regulation. So all of the MS4 requirements that are in the permit are the responsibility of the MS4 operator. In this case, you have two different municipalities who would be those MS4 operators. I think I've answered a couple of these. The presentation will be available after. Another question about having annual and interim progress certification due at the same time. I'll repeat, I am not going to ask the same questions on those two forms. They will be separate questions. A question about the annual report that is not due until 2025. Again, there is no annual report due in 2024. This says, the question says May. It would have been June under the last permit, but there is no annual report due in 2024. So not that you get a coasting year, but we do have a little time to, there are other permit requirements that will need your attention. So in lieu of filling out annual report forms, a good use of your time may be updating your swim plan. Let me go back up here. And I'm just going to take a couple more questions. I do see that there are a lot here. Again, I will try to follow up with these. Someone asked, when did the e-report submission number email go out? I believe I sent that on January 11th. It was just exactly what that slide had on it, which is this. It's just a screenshot of where to find that e-report submission number. Joe, I do see your comment here about mapping. I'm going to skip over it intentionally since I want to just get through some of these questions about this section. Schools are still considered MS4 operators, so you should still fill out your ENOI and send that into the department by February 20th. Comment here about DEPW. I'm not sure what that is. Lindsay, left your question about landfills. I'm going to have to follow up with you about that. I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about here. If you're talking about requirement for MSGP, or if you're talking about what you need to do as an MS4. Richard Grow said, and this will be my last question here, and I'm going to move along. We were advised by New York State DEC that our main highway yard did not require MSGP unless New York State DEC specifically required it. That's correct. You don't. And that was, again, under an old iteration of the MSGP. There was a sector in the back of the MSGP that essentially what you said here, which is the DEC could require certain folks to get coverage under the MSGP for their highway yards. That sector was removed from the MSGP. There's no SIC code for highway garages. You do not need to get coverage under MSGP for a highway garage. Richard, if you want to talk about this a little more, shoot me an email and I can get back to you and we can talk more about MSGP, and I can also help get you in touch with the folks in that work on the MSGP. Okay, so with that, I know there are a ton of questions coming in. I very much appreciate it. I'm going to have to move along just because I'm trying to be aware of our time. So with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Kathy.
Hi, I'm going to just start going over some of the basics of the MS4 permit requirements. As we know, hopefully by now, an MS4 is a municipal separate storm sewer system. And as we're all aware, there are 6 minimum control measures. That has not changed. What's changed is what's going to be required under each of them. I think we've done a lot to provide some more clarity and consistency. So the MS4 General Permit authorizes discharges of stormwater from municipal separate storm sewer systems located within designated urbanized areas to surface waters of the state. It includes coverage for automatic and additional designation. Currently, there's over 500 regulated entities. That includes your cities, towns, villages, counties, statewide agencies, some linear transportation authorities, and institutions. The permit term is 5 years. For your stormwater management program, or SWAMP, is that what we call it?
Yep.
SWAMP.
Yep.
Requirements you'll find those under part 4 of the permit. This is not an all-inclusive list. I just tried to highlight some of the things that I personally felt were important to do. So you are required, the MS4 operator is required to develop and implement and enforce the SWAMP. The SWAMP must be retained in written format, hard copy, or electronic copy, and that's referred to as the Stormwater Management Program Plan. The requirement is to annually update the SWAMP for compliance with the terms and conditions of the permit. Again, this should really not be anything new. We've been doing this all along. Maintain the records of activities completed, such as your trainings and inventories and things within that plan. Develop and maintain an inventory of entities assisting in permit implementation. And that inventory should include the name of the entity helping you, and the permit requirement that is being implemented or performed by that entity. Christina touched on this already, but reports must be submitted electronically using the forms located on DEC's website. Again, the annual reports, the reporting period for the annual report is January 3rd of the current year to January 2nd of the following year. And those reports are required to be submitted electronically to the department by April 1st of each year. The interim progress certifications. So now twice a year, the MS4 operators must electronically submit an interim progress certification, which verifies activities included in this Speedies General Permit that have been completed. Those are required to be submitted to the department on a semi-annual basis. So the reporting period of January 3rd through June 30th, those reports that certification will be submitted by October 1st of each year. And then for the period of July 1st through January 2nd, those need to be submitted by April 1st of each year. One of the things that you'll notice, hopefully going through the permits, if you have not had an opportunity, is there's been a lot of effort put into standardizing everything. So each minimum control measure you will find is broken into these categories. So there's a section on programs, there's an inventory section, prioritizations, and corrective actions. So as you go through the permit, you'll see that under programs, it's going to have your procedures, your training that's been given, documentation of who took the training, and then instructions on updating your procedures. Again, inventory, monitoring locations, construction sites, post-construction, stormwater management practices, and municipal facilities, and so on, and corrective actions. If an ongoing source of pollution is present, your time frame is based on whether or not it has a reasonable likelihood of adversely impacting human health or the environment. So that's an immediate time. Is that an immediate time frame? Corrective action should be taken within 30 days?
It varies through the permit.
Varies through the permit.
Yep.
Sorry.
Nope, it's okay.
And then if there is a under corrective actions, if there is no ongoing source of pollution, your time frame is based on the severity of the issue. That would be something like cleaning your catch basins, and things like that. So for mapping, mapping is not really a new requirement. It just has been put into a separate section now. So the MS4 operator must develop and maintain a comprehensive mapping system. Within 6 months of the effective date of coverage, the comprehensive system mapping must include your MS4 outfalls, the interconnections, your preliminary storm sewer shed boundaries, the MS4 infrastructure for select TMDLs, if that's applicable, and a base map. The base map has required information. It's going to include your automatic and additionally designated areas of the MS4, the names and location of all surface waters, and that's going to include your water body classification, the water body inventory, priorities water bodies list if applicable, and that information will include the impairment status and what that pollutant of concern is for that water body. And if applicable as well, if you are in a TMDL watershed area, those should be included on the base map where that watershed is. Your base map will also include your land use, your roads, and topography. So within the first 3 years of effective date of coverage, you should have the location of all monitoring locations. This is a requirement, location of all monitoring locations with prioritization, the focus areas, publicly owned post-construction stormwater management practices, and municipal facilities. The next phase of mapping is due within 5 years of the effective date of coverage, and that will include your MS4 infrastructure information, the conveyance, the type and direction of flow, the stormwater structures, the type and number of connections, and privately owned and operated post-construction stormwater management practices which discharge to the MS4. Time for questions.
Yep, so we've had a few questions come in. Thank you, Kathy, that was great. We are now, and you should also be able to see questions that are comments that are coming in from all the attendees. Can someone just give me a thumbs up maybe if you do see that? And then what I'm going to ask is earlier in the chat, we did have some questions come in about mapping. If you'd like me to address that now, just copy it down below while I scoot through here. That would be great. So just a couple of things to address. I saw one comment just about what does EDC, EDP mean. EDP is effective date of permit and EDC is effective date of coverage. For all of you, the continuing coverage, your effective date of coverage is the January 3rd date, the effective date of the permit. That is in part 2 of the permit under obtaining permit coverage. You can find more details on that there. The mapping, that is a question here from Angelica. The mapping that's required within 6 months. I hope we're all following along a little now in the chat. Does that have to be completed in a GIS, or is that what's for the mapping that is required? We ask. The mapping that is required under Part 4D does not have to be completed in a GIS. The only portions that have to be completed in a GIS are those sections which are subject to Part 8 and Part 9. There is one chunk underneath mapping, Part 4 mapping, which is about the infrastructure in a TMDL area. The TMDL, as we all know, is subject to Part 9 requirements. That piece of information under mapping actually is from a previous iteration of the permit, which is why we wanted to make sure we captured it in the permit moving forward. But all mapping is, besides Part 8 and Part 9 requirements, does not have to be completed in a GIS. So your comment here about the paper copies of maps. Paper copies are fine as long as it is functional for you. The point of the mapping is to make it a useful tool for implementation. Next question here, what is the, and I'm going to stop at 140 and we'll continue. Just so everyone's aware, we're going to give a couple minutes here. The extent of mapping interconnections, is it meant to include every private drain connection to an MS4 sewer? And my answer to that is no. Interconnections are where your MS4 connects to an adjacent MS4 or private sewer. So it's not the in, it's the out. It's treat your interconnections as an outfall, but instead of where it discharges to a surface water of the state, it discharges to adjacent infrastructure. Does the conveyance infrastructure also include all roadside swales? Your roadside swales would be included as they are their type of maybe a post-construction stormwater management practice. These ditches that are conveying water off of the sides of streets, I would treat them, they're just open channel green style infrastructure. So yes, you would want to include these roadside swales as part of your infrastructure. Bobby, I just went over the definition of interconnection, so I hope that was clear for you. If not, please reach out to me. Dylan, I'm going to say the same to you as well. Interconnections, we just went over that, so let me know if we need more information on monitoring requirements. We're going to go into monitoring requirements in MCM3. That's where these will show up again. Can I provide an example of complete mapping that is in compliance? There are some municipal or MS4 operators that do have a majority of this mapping complete. The DEC does not, we don't request or retain any of those mapping mapped projects on file here. It is requested sometimes in preparation for audits, so there could be some of that. We can talk about this. This is Jeffrey's question. We can talk about working with some of the MS4 operators on the call today and seeing if anyone is willing to share a complete, quote unquote complete, I'm going to say complete as far as it is now, mapping component that is as close to compliance as we can get, right? We'll understand that it's sort of like a template. I am going to skip over some of the MSGP questions now, just again to make sure we address what's here. William, you asked about standardized database formats for mapping requirements. So there are some GIS requirements, and those are listed in parts 8 and part 9. Aside from that, there's no true mapping database format requirement, and that is because anything from a paper map to a GIS, maybe you're using ArcGIS, QGIS, whatever that may look like for you, that would satisfy the permit requirement. So we don't have a standardized, acceptable, quote unquote, format. Oh, I just lost my spot. Joe asked, does the mapping requirement for privately owned post-construction SMPs only apply to those systems that were required as part of an NOI? That could certainly be where you get that information. The SMPs were likely part of your construction general permit, NOI. We do have a requirement in the MS4 general permit. We're looking to have the post-construction SMPs inventoried and mapped going back to 2003. It is likely that you won't have perfect records of all of these post-construction practices, but what we're asking for there is to essentially do the best you can. There was a time when a lot of effort and time went into planning for the post-construction practices. So please try your hardest to collect that information, maybe from some historic records, maybe from your old CGP NOIs, and include that information in your mapping and your inventory. There are a few more questions here. I am going to move along again, just for time. So I apologize. Back to Kathy. Thank you.
Now we're going to get a little bit into the minimum control measures. Again, these have not changed, but I'll go over them. Minimum control measure 1, public education and outreach program. Minimum control measure 2 is public involvement, participation. 3 is illicit discharge detection and elimination. 4 is your construction site stormwater runoff control. 5 is post-construction stormwater management. And minimum control 6 is pollution prevention and good housekeeping. So we're going to start with 1. That's where we start, public education and outreach. Again, I want to say this is not all encompassing of everything that's in the permit. I just highlighted some of the things that I felt were more important. I recommend everyone read their permit. So for development is focus areas. So within 3 years of the effective date of coverage, the MS4 operator must identify and document focus areas in your stormwater management program plan. So these focus areas that should be considered are areas discharging to priority waters of the state, sewer sheds for impaired waters, and those sewer sheds can be found in Appendix C of the permit. TMDL watershed, again, if applicable, areas with construction activities, areas with on-site wastewater systems, residential, commercial, and industrial areas, stormwater hotspots, and areas with illicit discharges. The focus areas, as we're referring to them now, in previous permit iterations, we called those geographic areas of concern. So it's the same intent, just different verbiage. As part of your public education and outreach program, target audiences and associated pollutant generating activities must be identified. Within 3 years of that effective date of coverage, the MS4 operator must identify and document the applicable target audiences. So residents, commercial, which includes your business owners and staff, institutions, and that would include managers, staff, and students. Construction is developers, contractors, and design professionals. Industrial are those owners and staff. And then the MS4 operators, municipal staff are also considered target audiences. Under development, education outreach topics, within 3 years of that effective date of coverage, the MS4 operator must identify and document in the Stormwater Management Program Plan the education and outreach topics and how the education and outreach topics will reduce the potential for pollutants to be generated by the target audience. Table 4 of the fact sheet that was previously distributed has information on educational topics based on the target audience if you're looking for suggestions or direction. For the public education and outreach program, so the frequency, once every 5 years, the MS4 operator must deliver an educational message to each target audience for each focus area based on the defined education and outreach topic. So as part of your permit, you've identified your target audience, you've identified what their pollutant of concern is, and then now you're going to deliver them a message. Document the completion of this requirement in the Stormwater Management Program Plan. So with your public education and outreach, usually it goes hand in hand, public involvement and participation, which is minimum control measure 2. So frequency for this control measure is annually provide an opportunity for public involvement and participation in the development and implementation of the Stormwater Management Program Plan. Provide an opportunity for the public to review and comment on the Stormwater Management Program Plan. Again, that is annually. And then annually as well, provide an opportunity for the public to review and comment on the draft annual report. Consideration of that public input annually. As part of your Stormwater Management Program Plan, you summarize comments received on the plan and the draft annual report. And within 30 days of receipt of public input, the Stormwater Management Program Plan needs to be updated based on those comments where it's appropriate. Any questions on minimum control measure 1 and 2?
And I'm going to give us about 4 minutes for this. I'm just taking a couple of notes quick. Okay, so a couple of questions did come in. What is considered a stormwater hotspot? So stormwater hotspot is a defined term in the MS4 General Permit. From the definition, it's a land use or activity that generates higher concentrations of hydrocarbons, trace metals, or toxicants that are found in typical stormwater runoff based on monitoring studies. More information on that can be found in the Stormwater Design Manual. In documenting the residents and businesses, is the DEC looking for a list of all the members of the audience, or just that you had your education and outreach held for each audience? Just that you had your public education and outreach activities held for each audience. I'm not expecting, you know, the list of all of the addresses that you sent pamphlets to. But with that, I do want to say that there could be quite a few combinations of things happening. You have several focus areas. There are many target audiences. There are a lot of topics you may want to educate those target audiences on, so you can understand that once you get down to it and you're doing an educational topic per target audience, per focus area, there are many permutations. Let's say, for example, you have 5 focus areas. Each of those 5 focus areas have 5 target audiences. You're at 25 combinations there. So that is something to pay attention to. Today is not the day, but we can definitely talk about what it could look like to implement across so many different combinations. Nicole, you asked about an example on how to calculate the removal of pollutants through education and outreach. This is a non-numeric effluent limit permit. So we don't include numbers in like our monitoring. We're not looking for that. So through implementation of the permit, you are achieving water quality standards. What I can say is, if you are interested in this, our TMDL group does exactly this. They do calculations for the pollutants that are removed through various minimum control measures. So if you're interested in that, Nicole Watts, if you don't mind just shooting me an email, I can follow up with our TMDL group about that. Who decides what's appropriate when dealing with public comment? Nicole also. This is a great question. So this is with regards to MCM2. MCM2 is interesting because, well, back in the day, there was someone who used to call the public who comment on things, they called them the troublemakers. So you have sometimes very interested public members who want to know what you're doing, why you aren't doing X, Y, or Z instead of what you are currently doing. And when it comes down to it, the stormwater program coordinator, the stormwater staff, everyone who's involved in the administration or what have you of your MS4 for your MS4 operator, they're going to know what's best. And an example I like to give is, what if someone came to you and said, well, everywhere, I want you to start installing ponds everywhere, and you get some kind of feedback like that. And well, this person is not aware of the budgetary constraints, the staffing constraints, or anything like that, or what necessitates installation of ponds everywhere. So the stormwater staff and the administration of the MS4 are most capable, I would say, of dealing with public comments about what to do with those public comments, if you're going to make a change in your stormwater program based on that comment or not. I am going to move along. Eric Holman, you just caught my eye. What is the basis for choosing a target audience? Must a municipality address all 6? The intention of both the focus areas, thank you, Kathy, of both the focus areas and the target audiences is, if you have them, to address them. If you are not addressing them for some reason, explain why in your SWIP plan. So if you are a municipality that does not have any construction occurring in your municipality, then explain that in your swim plan. Like, I will not be targeting anyone in the construction field because I don't have construction occurring in my town. I am gonna pass it back to Kathy so that she can move along into MCM6.
We're going to 3 first.
Oh, sorry, 3. Sorry.
I know you're excited to get to 6.
I am excited for 6. Municipality must address all 6 was in my head. Sorry, thank you.
That's all right. Illicit discharge detection and elimination, minimum control measure 3. So under this minimum control measure, within 6 months of the effective date of coverage, the MS4 operator must establish and document in the stormwater management program plan contact information for the public to report illicit discharges. And that's, if there's a hotline number, an email, who that person is that will receive those, that needs to be documented in that plan. Within 30 days of report of an illicit discharge, that needs to be documented in the stormwater management plan with the following information. So you get a report from a resident or somebody passing through your community that there's an illicit discharge. So you need the date of that report, the location of the alleged illicit discharge, the nature of the illicit discharge, follow-up actions taken or needed to be taken, and inspection outcomes and any enforcement taken from that report of illicit discharge. Under minimum control measure 3, monitoring locations, those are the inspection points within the MS4 that are necessary for illicit discharge detection. So that's going to include your MS4 outfalls that discharge to surface waters of the state, interconnections which discharge to another MS4 or a private storm sewer system, and stormwater conveyed from the MS4 operator's municipal facility to the MS4 operator's own MS4. Within 3 years of the effective date of coverage, the MS4 operator must develop and maintain an inventory of monitoring locations in the Stormwater Management Program plan. Monitoring locations, they are, again, like I said previously, we include priorities for these things. So a high priority monitoring location would be at a high priority municipal facility, discharging to an impaired waters, discharging within a TMDL watershed, discharging to water with designated best usage of primary and secondary contact recreation or higher, and high priority areas also confirm citizen complaints on 3 or more occasions in the previous 12 months. This prioritization needs to be updated annually in your Stormwater Management Program plan. The MS4 operator must also develop and implement a monitoring locations inspection and sampling program, and this needs to be done within 2 years of that effective date of coverage. So that includes, under that program, it must include inspection of monitoring locations once every 5 years, regardless of prioritization. There's a tongue twister for me. So if it's a high priority site or a low priority site, they still at least once every 5 years must be inspected. Sample monitoring locations that are characterized as suspect or obvious illicit discharge. Initiate track down procedures for monitoring locations characterized as suspect or obvious illicit discharge. And with those within 30 days, re-inspect those monitoring locations with the physical indicators not related to flow.
Sure. So on the screen now, you see is, I won't lie to you, it's just a hair outdated, but the premise is still here. So this is what was required under GP-0-24-003. It's the ORI Outfall Reconnaissance Inventory Sheet. It has been rebranded for GP-0-24-001 as Monitoring Locations Inspection Sampling Sheet to capture all of the different locations where you will be conducting monitoring under this permit. So what you have at the top is section 4, called physical indicators for flowing monitoring locations only. So when you get to a monitoring location and there is flow present, what does it look like? You're characterizing it here. Section 5, physical indicators for both flowing and non-flowing monitoring locations. Sometimes, hopefully most of the time you find that your monitoring locations have no flow. So below here, but if there could be flow also, of course, and you're filling out the section for either option. But here we have some things to record. Do you have any damage to your monitoring location? Let's talk specifically right now if you had an outfall. So you have an MS4 outfall. It's a pipe going into a creek. And is it crushed by a tree? Maybe the flared end section is hanging off? What's happening there? Do you notice any deposits or stains, abnormal vegetation we have going, could be growing in the pool below? Again, poor pool quality. Maybe there's foam in the pool. Is there some kind of oil sheen happening there? And just characterizing it that way. And if you say yes to any of these things here, you're re-inspecting within 30 days. Section 6, all the way at the bottom there, is the overall characterization of your monitoring location. So now you've done your assessment, and what does that mean? So this is your summarization. You get down to the bottom here and you're looking at sections 4 and 5 again to summarize for section 6. How would I characterize this monitoring location? So if you do have a monitoring location that has one or more indicators as present in section 4 with a severity of 3, or if it's obvious, which is a defined term in the MS4 General Permit, you would initiate your track down. Obvious is, something like smell of sewage, toilet paper flowing out of an MS4 outfall. There's more examples like this that can be found in the Center for Watershed Protection IDDE manual from 2004.
Let me just back up just to reiterate what what Christina just referenced, all of this terminology that we're using correlates with the Center for Watershed Protection's IDDE guidance manual ORI form. And so I would recommend that if you have any questions or you need some assistance, refer to that IDDE guidance from that Center for Watershed Protection.
And before I get the question, that is the most current version of that document.
So under Minimal Control Measure 3, develop and implement an illicit discharge track down program, and that needs to be done within 2 years of effective date of coverage. The procedures for that are described in Chapter 13 of that Center for Watershed IDDE guidance manual. That track down program needs to include corrective actions to be taken. And then the next bullet, develop and implement an illicit discharge elimination program within 2 years of effective date of coverage. So that program will include provisions for escalating enforcement and tracking, corrective actions to be taken, and timeframes for illicit discharge elimination. We have some moments for questions and answers.
I did want to say one thing, just as just a little background MCM3. So you'll notice now it's broken out, as Kathy mentioned, we have programs throughout the permit. The programs follow the same scheme each time they show up. So there's procedures that you develop, you train on your procedures, you write down who took the training, and then you update your procedures essentially as necessary. You know, it's like if you change who's doing up or what you're doing in your procedures, you want to update your procedures accordingly. There are 3 programs in MCM3, monitoring, location, sampling, and inspection and sampling, excuse me, monitoring locations, inspection and sampling, the track down program, and then the elimination program. It's a little odd that it's broken into 3 programs. However, it is not always the same person going out and doing the inspections as the person who is doing the elimination or some of the enforcement things. This provides a little flexibility. Of course, we could have distilled it down into 1 program, and then it is up to the MS4 operator to determine who's doing what. We went this route for this iteration of the permit. This is progress, not perfection. So we can talk about your disdain perhaps for my formatting, but that is the point behind having it as 3 distinct programs, again, because maybe you have different people doing different things. So we had a couple questions. I'm going to go until 2:06. Let's do that. Joe, you asked, and Joe, I don't know if you also copied, I know you had an MCM3 question earlier. I don't know if you copied it down, if this is it, but if you didn't, do so. This is a question about the sampling that's being done in the field. So 40 CFR Part 136 is all about the methods and tests that are done that require you to essentially bring your sample to a lab. We are not requiring that you take samples of the discharge from any of your monitoring locations and go to a lab. But what you can do is similar to Joe, I'm sure what you are doing, those little pool test strips, silt and sediment or turbidity monitors. If you have anything like that, that is sufficient for intents and purposes of permit implementation. Oops, sorry, I skipped ahead again. John Winter, what is the protocol for when residents ask about connecting catch basins in regards to the basement sump pumps? So basement sump pumps are an allowable non-stormwater discharge in this permit. That is really up to the municipality. If you don't want them to hook their sump pump up to your catch basin, that it may already be written in your codes like that or in your local law like that, but it's not a, it's allowable under the MS4 General Permit. When it becomes a problem is when you're conducting your IDDE track down or you're doing your inspections and you start to notice an entire neighborhood has not only they've connected their sump pumps, but they also discharge all of their washing machine water into their sump pump. So now you start to see foam, you start to see possibly greases coming through your infrastructure, and that's what you don't want to see. So again, it's an allowable discharge in the MS4 General Permit. It's really up to the municipality if you do or do not want to allow that to happen. John, and anybody, if you want more clarification on the questions you're asking, I am trying to go kind of quickly because there's a lot of questions. Just feel free to shoot me an email. Michael, you asked any changes to what is considered an outfall. This is a great question, Michael. No, there's no change to what is considered an outfall. So what we have done is, and maybe this is good for me, maybe for a future presentation, the definition of outfall, as it was in GP-0-24-003, was the discharge of stormwater from your MS4 to either a surface water of a state or to another MS4. So what we did in this permit was we split it out because it's kind of confusing. Well, if it's going to another MS4, it doesn't go to a surface water of a state. So is it really an outfall? We have other regulations that our state regulations that we follow that go across our Speedies program that use the term outfall explicitly for those discharges to a surface water of the state. So what I will summarize that in saying, if you were implementing the program using the definition that was in GP-0-15-003, which is outfalls that discharge to a surface water of the state or to an adjacent MS4, you have effectively inspected, mapped, and sampled both MS4 outfalls and interconnections as they are required under GP-24. So the definition, again, got split apart, but nothing has really changed. It just turned it from one definition into two. Richard, one of our biggest problems is floatables from stormwater runoff. We do a tremendous amount of public outreach on this issue. Does DEC consider or agree this issue is a stormwater priority? Yes, it is, Richard. It is a stormwater priority. In a ranking, I don't have an exact ranking of where it is, but what I will say, and I'm going to get into the Part 8 requirements in just a little bit, floatables are one of our top 5 pollutants of concern that can be addressed by the MS4 General Permit. As you all can imagine, there's a lot of different pollutants that cannot be addressed by this permit, but floatables is one of them that can. So we have floatables, phosphorus, silt sediment, nitrogen, and pathogens are stormwater pollutants of concern that we, again, consider in this permit. Phil Kojal, please ask your question again when we get down to part 9. I think I might answer it. It's about TMDLs. Oh, sump pumps. And just will I make the answers to these questions available afterwards? I'm going to try, Sarah. Sarah asked the question, will I have all the answers to these questions available to everyone afterwards? I'm definitely going to try. As you can see, there's probably already 100 questions that have come in. So I'm doing my best to kind of get through the nitty-gritty of it. I will attempt to consolidate and send out some more information to everyone along with the presentation. And I'm not sure if that presentation will be sent by email or posted on the website, but I will make sure that I get that information out to you all. Okay, with that, I am gonna move along.
Alrighty.
Kathy, thank you, or Kathy is gonna move along.
So we're gonna go over minimum control measure 4 and 5, and then we'll have room for more questions after that. So construction site stormwater runoff control is minimum control measure 4. Under this, the MS4 operator must develop and implement a construction oversight program documented in the stormwater management program plan, and that needs to be done within 1 year of that effective date of coverage. Along with that, within 6 months of the effective date of coverage, the operator must develop and maintain a construction site inventory and inspection tracking program. Prioritize construction sites within 30 days of becoming active, and annually update the prioritization in the inventory and document that in the stormwater management program plan. When we talk about prioritizing all construction sites, again, that prioritization needs to be done within 1 year of the effective date of coverage. High priority construction sites include those sites that have a direct conveyance to water bodies specified in the permit. Those sites with earth disturbance within 100 feet of any lake or pond, within disturbance within 50 feet of any rivers or streams, whether they're perennial or seasonal, and construction sites with greater than 5 acres of disturbed earth at any one time. If your construction sites do not fall into that category, they are considered low priority. For SWIP review, the MS4 operator needs to provide training for individuals or individual responsible for reviewing the SWIPs for acceptance. And that training is 4 hours of erosion and sediment control training that needs to be done within the first 3 years of effective date of coverage, and then every 3 years after that point in time. There is a requirement for a pre-construction meeting. That pre-construction meeting is held prior to commencement of construction activities. The owner operator listed on the NOI for that site, it needs to be present. The MS4 operator, the contractor or contractors responsible for implementing the SWIP for the construction activity, and the qualified inspector need to be at that meeting. For construction site inspections, there needs to be training for individuals responsible for construction site inspections every 3 years, that erosion and sediment control training, and then annually inspect all construction sites. For construction site closeout, the MS4 operator needs to ensure that final construction site inspection is conducted and documented. And then that notice of termination must be signed by the MS4 operator. And minimum control measure 5, post-construction stormwater management. So this includes both publicly and privately owned and operated post-construction stormwater management practices, post-construction stormwater management practices installed as part of any construction general permit covered site or individual speedies permit since 2003, and all new post-construction stormwater management practices constructed as part of the construction site stormwater runoff control program. Your post-construction stormwater management plan, stormwater management practice, too many acronyms, inventory and inspection tracking needs to be completed within 5 years of the effective date of coverage. Within 1 year of that effective date of coverage, the operator must develop and implement a post-construction stormwater management practice inspection and maintenance program. And that program, these are some of the things it needs to include: operation and maintenance of post-construction stormwater management practices, the documentation of the inspections, provision to initiate follow-up actions within 30 days of inspection. So if there is a problem with that stormwater management practice, you notify the operator of the practice and give them time to correct it. And then that program also needs to include provisions to initiate enforcement if follow-up actions are not complete. That needs to be done within 60 days of inspection.
Great. Okay, we're gonna give it another 5 minutes here. Scroll up a hair. From Rob Wasp. Does the prioritization of construction sites apply to only projects obtaining coverage under the Construction General Permit 20-001? So what I'll say to Rob is, it's for all of your construction sites. It is very possible that you have a construction site that originally obtained coverage under a previous Construction General Permit. So it applies to all construction sites. From Richard, does a professional engineer need to perform the training? Richard, I believe you're talking about the 4 the 4-hour erosion and sediment control training. So our permit says that you have to take this 4-hour department endorsed training in proper erosion sediment control from a soil and water conservation district or a department endorsed entity. That comes out of our construction program. I can clarify if those folks are PEs. I can double check that, but that, like I said, that does come out of our construction requirements, just where it what is the word, overlaps with our MS4 program. Let me write that down. Okay, let me get back over to the WebEx. Sorry, just as questions come in, it scrolls a little. Okay. LJ, still have the greater than 1 acre definition. The construction sites are defined in the construction general permit. In general, yes, it's the 1 acre threshold is what we go with. Missed that one earlier. Is Jessica Vrigney, is the 4-hour course being updated? I'm not sure about that. I can check in with our construction folks. Is that that might be in response to the design manual getting updated. They are working on that. That is not yet final or out yet, but it very well could be getting updated. From Kimberly Boyd, for completing the ENOI, can you confirm, and it's tangential, but we're going to go with it. Can you confirm that when we list the surface waters for the MS4, we should use all the water bodies within the town boundaries and not just water bodies discharging to the urbanized areas, which are the automatically designated areas, since MCMs 4 and 5 extend townwide? I will say yes, please include all the water bodies within your municipal boundaries or within your entity's boundaries. And exactly for the reason you mentioned here, Kimberly, because MCMs 4 and 5 extend townwide. I'll go over this a little bit when we get into the Part 8 requirements. But again, it's a surface water discharge permit, so you need to know to which water bodies you are discharging. Joe, you asked about follow-up inspections to confirm corrective actions have been completed. Can we rely on an inspector inspection reports to confirm completion of corrective actions, or must MS4 operators always perform an on-site re-inspection? That's a great question. You know what? I'm going to take this back as a question to think about and review my permit language to make sure I give an adequate answer here. Let me write this one down. Thank you, Joe. Another question about the 4-hour training, if it's going to be revised. I'm still not sure about that. The training calendar. So Corey, you mentioned here your question about the training calendar. I believe what you're talking about is there used to be a calendar on our construction general permit page that had when all the 4-hour trainings were going to be made available. We went through quite an overhaul in the website. I'm sure you've all noticed the web pages look very different now. I'm not sure if the plan is to have that calendar reposted on the web page, or if there's going to be another avenue of getting the word out about the trainings that are upcoming, but I'm also going to follow up on that, as I will with most of these questions, but I'd have to just double check with other staff about these. Let me copy this one down. Okay, and I think I just did my 5, so I'm going to stop there.
Okay.
And we're going to move on now to MCM 6.
Yes. Pollution prevention and good housekeeping. I know we're all excited about this one. So I know Christina's laughing at me. So I'm going to start off with saying MCM 6 has been reorganized into 3 sections. The first is best management practices, and then it's municipal facilities, and then the last is municipal operations. So pollution prevention and good housekeeping, the MS4 operator must develop and implement a pollution prevention and good housekeeping program for municipal facilities and municipal operations. Within 3 years of the effective date of coverage, incorporate best management practices. There's a comprehensive BMP list included in the permit. So I did not list them all here because it's several pages of it. Develop and implement a municipal facility program that needs to be completed within 3 years of the effective date of coverage. And that includes municipal facility procedures, and develop and maintain a municipal facility inventory that needs to be done, completed within 2 years of the effective date of coverage.
Yes.
So municipal facility prioritization, again, to be completed within 3 years of the effective date of coverage. High priority municipal facilities include storage of chemicals, salt, petroleum, pesticides, fertilizers, antifreeze, lead acid batteries, tires, waste debris, fueling stations, and/or vehicle or equipment maintenance repair. High priority municipal facilities which qualify for a no exposure certificate are considered low priority municipal facilities. And then so those municipal facilities that may qualify for that no exposure certification, that would come into play when all activities and materials are completely sheltered from exposure to rain, snow, snowmelt, and/or runoff. No exposure details are found under the minimized exposure BMP in the permit. All other municipal facilities not listed here are considered low priority facilities. For a high priority municipal facility or facilities, the municipal facility, there must, oh my goodness, look at that, tongue tied myself. So the municipal facility specific stormwater pollution prevention plan needs to be completed within 5 years of the effective date of coverage. There is included assessments, wet weather visual monitoring of monitoring locations once every 5 years, and a comprehensive site assessment once every 5 years. For low priority municipal facilities, the assessments still need to be done. And those are a comprehensive site assessment once every 5 years. There is not a SWIP requirement for a low priority municipal facility. As part of Minimal Control Measure 6, develop and implement a municipal operations program that needs to be done within 3 years of the effective date of coverage. That includes BMPs, corrective actions, catch basin inspection and maintenance, road, bridges, parking lots, and right-of-way maintenance. The catch basin inspection and inventory timeline correlate with your mapping requirement. And your corrective action is based on the debris level in your catch basin. So for catch basin inspection and maintenance, there is a 4-step approach now. So identify when an inspection is necessary, inventory the inspection with 5 pieces of information for that inspection: the date, the depth of the structure, the depth of sump, the approximate level of trash, sediment, or other debris, and date of clean out. Based on the results of the inspection, clean out catch basins. Not required to clean out catch basin if it's operating properly and there is no trash, sediment, and/or debris in the catch basin, or the sump depth of the catch basin is less than or equal to 2 feet. As part of that catch basin inspection and maintenance program, the 4th step is manage the material and/or water removed from the catch basin so it doesn't re-enter the MS4 or surface waters of the state. Leave anything else?
Nope, that's right.
For roads, bridges, parking lots, and right-of-way maintenance, within 6 months of effective date of coverage, develop and implement procedures for sweeping and/or cleaning municipal streets, bridges, parking lots, and right-of-ways owned and operated by the MS4. Sweeping every 5 years in the spring, and annually for business districts and commercial areas. That's sweeping needs to be done annually from April 1st through October 31st. Questions and answers.
That was great. Thank you. MCM6 is kind of a beast. As Kathy mentioned, she didn't go through all the BMPs. That was one of the bigger comments. Oh man, let's date myself. That was one of the bigger comments on the draft from 2016. You know, tell me what BMPs or the stakeholder work groups going into the 2016 draft. You know, tell me what BMPs you want me to implement. That is why that list is so robust. I mentioned before, but I'm going to say it again because I think I might have forgotten to mention this early, but there are a ton of requirements in this permit. If your entity is not doing something or it does not apply to you, please state so in your stormwater management program plan. That is a condition written in our permit that if it doesn't apply, please say so. It's in part 4 under the SWIP program. I can get an exact reference in a second, but it is there. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go into some questions here. I'm going to give it 5 minutes or 2:30, and then I'm going to move along. We do have quite a bit of material still to get through. And thank you again. I appreciate all of your questions. Okay. John Russo, if a facility is required to file for MSGP, does it still need to be listed under MCM6? John, this is a great question. So my answer within the bounds of the permit is no. This is not going to be an MS4 related municipal facility. However, and I believe this is written in the fact sheet, I think it's written something to the effect of, although not a permit requirement, the DEC recommends, listing all of your facilities in a comprehensive way could be really valuable. Just knowing where your speedies permits live throughout your municipality, which one's covered by which permit, and that way you can have more of an organized attempt at completing all of your monitoring or your sampling or whatever that looks like for all of the different speedies permits. So I'll repeat it again. No, it's not required to be in your facilities list, but it could come in handy. So if it is there, maybe think about including it. This is similarly for our CSO communities that are on the line. You have a lot of municipal facilities that are going to be sitting inside of that CSO area. Those municipal facilities are not required to implement MS4 permit requirements, but it would be good to know that you have maybe a DPW substation in a CSO area, because maybe in the next 10 years, you plan to do a separation project. And once that area becomes separated, no longer sanitary and stormwater combined, you will have a highway garage. I'm going to go with it right now, a DPW garage that is residing in a newly separated MS4 area, which would then you'd have to implement your MS4 permit program there. So just another reason why you might want to have a full list. For the trainings required, this is from Eric Swenson for the trainings required, will DEC provide guidelines, curricula, or trainings themselves? Can existing YouTube videos suffice for training? So what I'll say is trainings are going to look a little different for different municipalities. Right now we're in MCM6, so I'm going to use some of the trainings that might happen here. Maybe you want to have someone trained up on what to look for when they go to different municipal facilities. It is possible that some of the MS4 operators only have low priority facilities. So in which case they'd only want to be trained on low priority requirements, whereas other MS4 operators might have exclusively high priority facilities. So then they might want to be trained on exclusively those high priority requirements. So just a little bit of variation. Can a YouTube video suffice? Yes, a YouTube video could suffice. These are not all meant to be classroom setting, multi-day trainings. Sometimes a training is a 2-page how to clean out a catch basin guide, you know, like it doesn't need to be, they don't have to be overly robust. I'll put it that way. Let's see. Sorry, just scrolled again. Sabrina, a wash bay affiliated with a municipal DPW considered MSGP. If you're, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, highway garages are not MSGP facilities. If you are concerned about this, let's talk about it. Maybe you have some other activities that are happening on site that could qualify for MSGP. It's possible, although I don't know of a situation that it happens, that you could have a part of your facility could actually be covered by MSGP if it's truly separate from your, you know, what's happening in MS4 land. So Sabrina, if you want to reach out to me about a specific highway garage that you're concerned about in this wash bay, let's talk about it. Michael, would high priority municipal facilities require an MSGP? For example, a recycling yard or salt storage facility. If it is MSGP eligible, then those facilities should get MSGP coverage. However, it is possible that you just have some kind of DPW garage and there's a salt shed on site, and that would be some salt storage, and that would not require MSGP coverage. Again, as I mentioned to Sabrina, Michael, please feel free to reach out to me, or as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, there's an MSG compliance email if you have some more MSGP related questions. If any of the questions do, which they will probably, if they do coincide with some MS4 permitting coverage, if you wouldn't mind just CCing me so I can be part of that conversation. It not only helps all of you folks get everything straight, it does help me when people come with me in the future with more questions. Well, you know what? I'm going to address this. Michael, you caught me. Okay. Will DEC prepare and circulate a report shell for an MS4's SWIP so they're all in the same format? I might have mentioned earlier, I think I did in the presentation, that what, or actually, no, it's going to come up later, but you caught me now, so it's fine. The SWIP components tool that is on our website, that is essentially your template for your SWIP plan. So I would look at that a little bit closer and see if that could satisfy what you're talking about in coordination with the compliance item summary tool. I'm going to stop 231 and we're going to continue. Oh, I'm up. Okay. Bear with me, folks. Okay, we're going to switch gears. I'm going to present now. I will follow up in the chat, although I won't have time to read ahead. So please bear with me. So we're going to move into the enhanced requirements, which are for impaired waters with or without a TMDL. And these are found in parts 8 and part 9 of General Permit 24-001. So the general permit includes requirements in part 8, and it addresses sewer sheds that discharge to impaired waters without a TMDL. A sewer shed, different than a watershed. A sewer shed is a delineation of a drainage area which uses both topography and the stormwater infrastructure together. So it's that total drainage area of the collection system in coordination again with topography that service and discharge to the water body that we're talking about here. The impaired waters that are included in Appendix C are the impaired waters that we're talking about in Part 8. Those water bodies were determined using certain criteria, and those criteria include if they have a pollutant source of urban stormwater runoff, and if the pollutant impacting the water body can be addressed through implementation of the MS4 General Permit. I mentioned before, I can't remember who, but someone asked about floatables being a priority. So here, point proven, our pollutants of concern that we are concerned about are a little redundant, are phosphorus, silt sediment, pathogens, nitrogen, and then those floatables. Again, when you look at Appendix C, you'll see these pollutants of concern listed at the top. There are some various names given to these different pollutants that we include, but we include them all in Appendix C. Each pollutant of concern is then addressed in a corresponding section of Part 8, excuse me. The requirements of Part 8 build up off perfectly of what is required in either Part 6 or Part 7. In this way, it's a true stepwise function of the permit. You are building off of what I sometimes term the base program. Okay, more on impaired waters without a TMDL. I'm not going to go into super nitty-gritty details, but I do want to point out a couple of things. So for mapping for impaired waters without a TMDL, some of the mapping requirements in Part 8 occur at an expedited time frame compared to that which is required in the Part 4D mapping section. For example, the infrastructure mapping that occurs within 5 years of EDC in Part 4D occurs within 3 years for those who are subject to Part 8. I'll repeat again, please make sure you read the permit very carefully and slowly. There are some nuances, and I'm trying to pick those out for you here so that no one gets caught up. Another question I've gotten recently is, where did ADA MS4 outfalls come from, and why are they a permit requirement? So ADA MS4 outfalls are additionally designated area MS4 outfalls. And let me tell you the story of how they came to be. MS4 outfalls, or as they were previously called in GP-0-24-003, only occur in the automatically designated area. You may remember just a few short weeks ago that all of your outfalls only occurred, again, in that automatically designated area. However, we have criterion 3 of our additional designation criteria that's found in Appendix B of the permit if you're interested. And that is the extension of implementation of MCMs 4 and 5 to the municipal boundary. So in order to properly implement MCMs 4 and 5, the requirements of MCMs 4 and 5 that are in Part 8, you need to know if the discharge is going to, the discharge in the additionally designated area based on criterion 3 is going to an impaired water. So again, comes all full circle back to the fact that this is a surface water discharge permit. You need to know where things are going, where they're being discharged. And then once over here, we have this extended area based on criterion 3. So we need to still know where that flow is going. And because of this nuance that the MS4 outfalls were only in automatically designated areas, ADA MS4 outfalls were created to kind of address this concern. I'm not going to go into all the requirements of Part 8 today. Again, I mentioned before that they truly do build up off of Part 6 and 7, but I do want to go over the timeline for compliance in Part 8 a little bit. Mapping, as I mentioned, occurs at an expedited time frame, but most of the other Part 8 requirements are only completed after the mapping is complete. Again, it's important to read the permit closely, but I'm going to show you an example here. So at the top, this is just a quick snip out of the permit. So it's for Part 8A, which is phosphorus. A1 here, mapping. The mapping is required to be, for infrastructure mapping is required within 3 years of EDC. Again, I'll just use the citation again. So it's Part 8A1. And then below here, we have the illicit discharge detection and elimination. And it says following the completion of 8A1. So following the completion of your mapping, then do this. And this is, again, this is specific for MCM3, building up off of your MCM3 program, but you do not have to do this until after your mapping is already complete. And I don't mean complete when you feel like completing it. I mean complete and complying with the permit, which is 3 years after effective date of coverage. The next section I'm going to go into now is about Part 9 requirements, watershed improvement strategies, requirements for TMDL implementation. Similar to your Part 8 requirements, I'm not going to go into too much of the nitty gritty, but I do want to give a little bit of background on the TMDLs. I have gotten a few questions on TMDLs in general lately, so I kind of want to give a quick brush of overview of this stuff. TMDL is total maximum daily loads. A TMDL is the calculation of the maximum amount of a pollutant allowed to enter a water body, so the water body will meet and continue to meet water quality standards for a specified pollutant. Watersheds are the delineation of the total drainage area to a nearby water, regardless of any administrative or municipal boundaries. So that means that a watershed can include multiple municipalities, parts of municipalities, and all of their contributions together. TMDLs are calculated by taking into consideration all of the sources of the pollutant of concern within this watershed. The TMDL determines the pollutant reduction that is necessary to meet water quality standards and allocates the reductions to all of the contributors of that pollutant. In the MS4 General Permit, it requires best management practices to be implemented in order to meet the pollutant load reduction for local MS4 operators that are contributing the pollutant in question to the water body, in addition to whatever is required in Part 6 and Part 7. So that was kind of a mouthful, and I'm going to say it again just a little bit differently. If there is an MS4 operator contribution to a TMDL, that MS4 operator is given a reduction that they need to hit, and that reduction is calculated based on the program they're already implementing in the MS4, based on the MS4 General Permit, the base program, Part 6 or Part 7, depending on the operator type. And then also, if they can't hit their reduction with just through implementation of the base program, then there are some more enhanced requirements. Those enhanced requirements are what show up in Part 9. And if a TMDL, this is like the flip side of this is if a TMDL has an MS4 contribution and the TMDL is not listed in the permit, the load reduction is satisfied by the BMPs in Part 6 and 7. So I'll say it again a different way. There are certain TMDLs, I'll go to the list here. There are certain TMDLs, oops, sorry about that. Certain TMDLs that are listed in our permit that are subject to Part 9 requirements. If you are an MS4 operator and you have a contribution to a TMDL, but that TMDL is not listed here, through implementation of your program in Part 6 and 7, you are thereby satisfying your TMDL load reduction. You are only in this list if the load reduction is not satisfied by Part 6 and 7. This does get a little bit dense. This section starts to get a little bit dense. Again, my goal is to try and help all of you, as well as myself, to try and work through some of this. These permit requirements have been included for MS4 operators that discharge to waters with an EPA-approved TMDL. And I'm, again, not going to go through the specific sections because each of the TMDLs are written to meet, to match a specific impairment in those watershed characteristics. So there is some variation. Yes, there are some similarities, but again, there's some variation between those. So I'm not going to go through that today. Questions and answers. Let's see what we have here. I'm not sure when I started talking, but I'm gonna go up here. Kelly Emmerich. So there's a question here about if a catch basin does not have a sump. I'm gonna address a couple of these quick because they are kind of tangential. If a catch basin does not have a sump, then it doesn't, if you're talking about the catch basin cleanout plan, then there's nothing to clean. However, I will say that catch basins without a sump are not really, it's not the point of a catch basin. The point of a catch basin is to remove pollutants from these stormwater runoff prior to its discharge to a receiving water. Phil, I think I might have missed the first part of your sentence, Phil Kojal. So if you don't mind repeating your question, I'll take a look at it a little bit differently here. An example of how an MS4 can address waterfowl areas when needed. What defines this? To reduce waterfowl droppings from entering the MS4. Oh, things like signage about not feeding the birds, perhaps. It's also possible that you have other techniques that that you use to deter waterfowl from congregating. Things like, I know that there's a municipality who used they were plastic, fake, obviously, floating replica deceased geese to deter geese from frequenting certain areas. That was another thing that they had done. Richard Grow. For highway, oh, you know what? I am gonna skip this a little because I do want to get into part 8. Sorry about that. In review of Part 8B3, in order to determine if the MS4 is subject to Part 8, does one only consider the list of in Appendix C or in a table in the permit? For Part 8, the water bodies are listed in Appendix C. I think that answers your question. In addition, so everyone is aware, and just as a reminder, the Appendix C water bodies are also now on the Stormwater Interactive map, so you can view them there in a web mapper fashion. I am working to get these posted on the GIS Clearinghouse. I don't have that complete yet, so those folks that have a GIS can download them for use. Here we go. DEC website is not. Kathleen Moss, you asked a question about the additionally designated areas that don't extend to the municipal boundary. If you could send me some screenshots of that, I'd love to take a look at exactly which automatically does it, or excuse me, additionally designated areas you're looking at and see if there is an error in any of our data. So Janet Anderson, you asked if a smaller sewer shed has impaired waters without a TMDL, but it is inside a greater watershed with a TMDL, do we just use Part 9 or Part 8? That is a great question. So what I'm going to say is it depends. In Part 3, we explain what happens if you have both of these scenarios happening. And I'm going to say it depends because it depends on the pollutant of concern. East of Hudson is a phosphorus impaired TMDL watershed. So if you do have a sewer shed that goes to a nitrogen impaired or floatables impaired water body, you're going to want to address that through the Part 8 requirements. And I'm going to give this just one more minute because I do have a bit to go over and we might run out of Q&A time at the end, actually. Eric Swenson, you asked I should have skipped it because it's not a Part 8 question, but that's okay. If 2 or more MS4 operators, MS4s, interconnect, how do you determine what is the maximum contribution from each and how do you monitor this? I'm not sure about what you mean about maximum contribution, but what I would say is you monitor at the point where the flow leaves your jurisdiction, where your pipe goes into the adjacent pipe. That's where your responsibility would end. Kathleen Moss, Wappinger Lake is identified silt sediment, but the watershed is not highlighted in the DEC website map. Is the entire Wappinger Creek subject to silt sediment concerns? I'll ask you also to send me a screenshot of this, but what I will say is that the water bodies that are listed in Appendix C are all segments. So even lakes are broken into segments. It is possible that not an entire lake and not an entire creek, as we all know it as a creek, is impaired. It's possible that only parts of that creek or that lake are impaired. So it would only be for the discharge that goes to the impaired segments that you would have to implement Part 8 requirements. That is going to be all the time I'm going to take for questions. I know there are a lot of questions still coming in, and I very much appreciate it. I'm going to go just through the last couple slides here I have. I want to make sure we're all up to date on what's to expect and what's going on and what's coming down the pipe here. So thank you. So first I want to address some tools that are available for all of you as you begin your implementation journey. So the first tools that I want to emphasize, there are no better tools than the permit, the fact sheet, and the responsiveness summary. You can tell, hopefully, by how robust those documents are, that the DEC has put a lot of time and effort. The team working on those documents here have been very dedicated over the last year and a half, and specifically, that was a very intense time for us to get all those documents together. The fact sheet, what I would say is, open your permit, open your fact sheet side by side, and read them in tandem. The fact sheet gives a lot of these, the department, it's not a permit requirement, but the department recommends sort of ideas that you can use for permit implementation. The responsiveness summary, if possible, open that side by side also. A lot of you sent in some amazing comments during a public comment period. Those were addressed in one way or another through the response to comments process, and that is in the responsiveness summary. All three documents, the fact sheet and the responsiveness summary follow the same outline as the permit. So you should be able to turn a page in the fact sheet, turn a page in the permit, turn a page in the responsiveness summary, and follow along in that fashion. The fact sheet does have a little bit of, excuse me, it has a little bit of background in the first few pages, just how we got here, the phase 2 remand rule and things like that. But after that, it falls in sync. The other tools that I want to point you to, if you have not seen already, the MS4, on the MS4 toolbox page, there's a SWMP plan components tool, as well as the compliance item summary tool. The SWMP plan components tool, I was alluding to earlier, but what I would recommend is printing it out or saving it down, however you feel fit, and using that almost as the table of contents for your SWMP plan. Try to fill out each item in your SWMP plan. Also, it might just be a great place to say this does or doesn't apply to me, and move on from there. Make sure you fill in all of those items as you populate your SWMP plan. The compliance summary items tool is a summarization of all the compliance schedule that is embedded throughout the permit. But what I will say is the permit is the ruling document. So if there is any inconsistency with the SWMP plan components tool or the compliance item summary tool, please defer to the permit. That said, if you do find an issue, let me know. My goal is to have these tools in the best format that we can have so that everyone can use them for implementation. So if there is an error, again, please let me know. It was those were my tools entirely, so I will take fault for any of the errors found in them. As far as grants, I know this was a question earlier. DEC does offer 2 grants. One is the MPG MS4 mapping grant, and the other is the WQIP vac truck grant. These RFAs for these grants come out in May, and the applications are usually due in the end of July. This year, the deadline was pushed just a hair. It's not the normal, so don't expect that. Please anticipate having your applications in by the end of July. The mapping, I do expect a lot of applications for mapping in particular, especially now that it is a permit requirement. You will notice that there are a lot of different things that can be mapped, quote unquote, as part of the mapping grant. We have to walk a fine line with what is grant, like above and beyond permit requirements, and what is funding compliance. So these above and beyond compliance items, it is a grant. These are supposed to be, I'm using the word fun loosely. They're supposed to be fun projects to kind of get really good projects underway here, and not just funding compliance. So that's why some of those items are there. You will notice, however, that it does mirror the requirements of the permit pretty closely. My tips for you for grant applications: to read the RFA very closely. They change slightly year to year. Sometimes what was required one year was not required the year before, and vice versa. And please make sure that all the documents that are required to be attached are actually attached. That's one of the biggest problems, is that some of these, honestly, I'll say minor items that just need to be there to check a box aren't there, and the projects become ineligible. So for our next steps, I have a few presentations coming up. On February 27th, I'll be doing a presentation with John Dunkel and Andy Sansone. It's a Zoom training. It'll be a 4-day session, or 4-hour session. On March 26th, I will be presenting at the Western New York Stormwater Conference and Trade Show in Buffalo. May 16th, I'll be at the Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council Spring Conference in Batavia. If you have any presentations, opportunities that you're interested in me attending, please let me know. I do have some other unconfirmed presentations for this spring, but these are just my confirmed ones for now. I also want to let you all know that I am planning to engage in the with the MS4 operators a bit more moving forward. I know it's been a bit quiet from the DEC for you all for a little while now. I'm not 100% sure how this is going to look, but obviously there are a lot of you on the call here today. We had around 500 at the beginning of this presentation, but I would like to start having semi-annual to annual meetings. And I'm also thinking about starting some kind of newsletter coming out of the DEC office. These are all just ways that you can have some FaceTime with me. I know I didn't get through all of your questions today, but it's a good opportunity for you to maybe get some quick responses from the DEC, but also to give you the, for me to be able to follow up with folks about compliance items and trying to keep people on schedule with getting things done. That is all I had for today. We have a couple of minutes left. So with that, I'm just going to look through, some of these questions that we had. I did write a couple of notes down earlier. So one, I'll repeat again, the presentation will be made available. Again, I'm not sure if I'll have it posted to the website or I'll send it out via email, but you'll certainly receive an email from me about that. I have now all of your contact information. Thank you for registering for this presentation. It's just a great way, great, easy, and helpful way for me to get accurate email addresses. I was using just what was included in annual reports last year. And you can imagine some of it was just, things were spelled wrong, periods were missing. And then with the new year, supervisors, mayors, and things like that, there was a bit of turnover. So thank you for registering. There were a few questions that I did not address, but I want to kind of blanket overview address now. Where am I doing things? I think there was a question about what about what about mapping for the county or the state roads that run through my town? And my response to you is, you are doing what is within your jurisdiction. Just as if you would not clean out a neighboring town or village's catch basin, you won't be doing your education there. You won't be doing your MCM3 monitoring locations and inspections and sampling there. There is a little cheat sheet table. There are actually 2 tables in the fact sheet that have where am I doing what kind of scenarios to help you work through some of what permit requirements to do where. I will repeat again because it came up a couple more times. There is no annual report due in 2024. Your first annual report will be due in April of 2025. And mapping in GIS, it just came up a couple of times. Where am I mapping in using a GIS? You are mapping using a GIS for everything in parts 8 and parts 9. Everything else, so if you are just implementing part 6, the part 6 base program, part 7 base program, and what is present in part 4D for mapping, those requirements don't have to be completed in a GIS. They can be completed using a variety of different tools, paper maps being one of them. Let me see what else we can get through here. Oh, everyone is saying thank you. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. I just like blitzed up a little bit. Mary McSwan, I just zipped up the chain of hair. I'm going to try and just answer as many questions as possible in the next couple minutes. Is there a New York State GIS file for surface waters of the state? Yes, there is. The surface waters of the state file that you should use is called the Water Body Inventory Priority Water Bodies List, the WIPWL. That is available on the New York State GIS Clearinghouse. There's another shapefile there. It is the Water Body Classification shapefile that is also on the GIS Clearinghouse. Links to both of those shapefiles are in the fact sheet, Mary. There's a table in there of all of the base map information and how you can find those files for all of those open source kind of data. And now I lost my spot here. Hold please. One more minute. And I'll keep you all here. Actually, I won't because I've lost my spot. Thank you all for today. Thank you, Kathy, for joining me today. You did an amazing job. And I look forward to hearing from all of you and see you at some presentations this year. Thank you. Craig and Andrea, can you pause the recording? And also save